The royal court had gathered to watch Maren Grayle die slowly. They called it mercy. They called it healing. They called it the only way to save Alpha King Malric Stormholt from the death fever burning beneath his skin, but every wolf in the fever hall knew the truth. The court had not brought Maren because they believed she could survive. They had brought her because she was wolfless, lowborn, and useful enough to spend. She stood barefoot on the black marble before the fever dais, her plain healer's dress damp at the collar from the heat rolling out of the king's body. Golden fever light pulsed through the hall like a second sun trapped under stone. It crawled along the wolf banners, flashed across silver bowls of bitter herbs, and painted the faces of the nobles with a warmth that looked almost holy. It was not holy. It smelled of burnt fur iron, and a curse sealed too long beneath royal skin. Alpha King Malric lay half upright on the obsidian dais, wrists bound in silver fever chains to stop his claws from tearing through his own chest. He was still terrifying, even weakened, broad-shouldered, black-haired, his face cut with the kind of harsh beauty that made courts kneel before they remembered they had legs. His gold eyes opened only halfway, but when they moved, everyone in the hall lowered their gaze. Everyone except Maren. She could not look away. The fever beneath his skin moved like a beast pacing behind glass. Lady Sorrel Vask stood beside the dais in a gown of pale moon-blue silk, one hand resting near Malric's shoulder, without truly touching him. Her silver-blonde hair fell in perfect waves, and the white wolf pendant at her throat glowed with soft, healing light. "The fever has rejected every high healer," Sorrel said, her voice smooth enough to pass for sorrow. "It is burned through 3 moon priests, 2 blood seers, and the king's own war physician. If the girl has any gift at all, let her prove it now." The girl. Not healer. Not Maren. Maren folded her hands together to stop them shaking. High Fever Master Odrin, an old man with smoke-stained fingers and a collar of silver vials, looked down at her as if weighing a cracked cup. "You understand the right of taking Maren understood enough." A healer placed both hands on the patient. The sickness passed into the healer's body. A trained wolf healer forced the poison through the beast blood and burned it out before it reached the heart. A wolfless healer had no beast blood to defend her. That was why no one used wolfless healers for royal fever, unless they wanted the healer gone. Odrin lifted one of the silver vials from his collar and turned it so the court could see the empty glass. If she survives, the fever has chosen a carrier. If she dies, the death fever will have spent itself on a body the crown can afford to lose. A few nobles murmured approval. Maren's fingers went cold. Odrin looked at her not unkindly, which somehow made it worse. For the record of the hall, Maren Grayle enters the rite with knowledge that a wolfless healer may not endure royal sickness. "I understand," Maren said. Someone laughed softly. "She speaks as if courage can grow a wolf," a noblewoman whispered. Another answered, "Let it grow quickly then. The king is short on time." Maren kept her face still. It was a skill learned in sick rooms. Do not flinch when powerful people blamed pain on the hands trying to ease it. Do not answer when they called your gift incomplete. Do not show hunger when they fed you scraps for saving old soldiers, kitchen girls, and servants they would never remember by name. She had spent 9 years in the lower healing ward, drawing fever from bodies the high healers refused to touch. Small fevers, common fevers. The kind that did not raise status, win favor, or earn a place near the royal dais. She had survived every one. But the Alpha King's death fever was not common. It struck her before she even reached him. Her knees almost buckled. Malric's eyes opened fully, gold locked on silver gray. For one heartbeat, the hall narrowed to the space between them. The nobles, the fever, Bowles the chains, Sorrel's cold smile, all of it thinned beneath the force of the king's stare. He looked at her, not like a ruler studying a tool. He looked at her like a wounded beast, recognizing the last sound before silence. "Who brought her?" he rasped. His voice scraped through the hall. Odrin bowed. "Your counsel, Majesty. The girl is resilient to fever. Wolfless bodies sometimes resist what would agitate a beast." Malric's gaze did not leave Maren. "Wolfless bodies die quietly. That is why cowards choose them." Silence struck the room. Maren felt the words cut through every polished excuse the court had wrapped around her death. Sorrel's fingers tightened against the edge of the dais before her smile returned. "Majesty, the fever is speaking through pain. We do this to save you." "No," Malric said. The single word shook one of the silver bowls. Maren saw it then. Behind the king, where every alpha's wolf shadow should have stood there, was only a sealed shape pressed flat against the wall. A massive black wolf outline trapped beneath layers of golden fever light, as if something had pinned the beast inside its own blood. The wolf's eyes were closed, but the fever around it moved, not toward the high healers, toward Maren's pulse. High Fever Master Odrin took her wrist. His fingers were dry and hard. "Place your hands on the king's chest." Malric pulled against the chains. Silver burned around his wrists. "Do not touch me." The warning should have frightened her. It did. But what frightened Maren more was the thing beneath his fever. A vibration almost too deep to feel. Not a growl. A trapped howl beating against royal blood. Lady Sorrel stepped down from the dais and came close enough for Maren to smell roses and frost on her skin. "You wanted to be more than a lower ward girl, did you not? More than the little wolfless healer who cools servant brows and pretends that makes her sacred." Maren looked at her. Sorrel smiled gently for the court. "Then save your king." The words were kind. Her hand was not. She seized Maren by the back of the neck and forced her forward. Maren's palms struck Malric's chest. Golden fever exploded up her arms. The hall vanished in light. Her body tried to reject it. Every nerve screamed. Heat drove beneath her skin into her bones, into the soft beating places under her wrists. The fever was enormous, savage, royal. It should have consumed her heart in the first pulse. Instead, it stopped at her pulse, waiting. Maren's wrists cracked open with silver fever light. It climbed through the veins beneath her skin, not from her mouth, not from her voice, but from the hard rhythm beating under her palms. The fever inside Malric did not feel like illness. It felt like a sealed animal recognizing the only blood that could hear it. The black wolf shadow behind the king lifted its head. Every noble in the hall went silent. The light under Maren's wrists braided upward in sharp living strands, first a vein, then a spine, then the massive shape of a wolf made from fever, blood, and moon-silver pain. Its eyes opened bright and furious, fixed not on Maren but on Malric. The Alpha King stared at it as if his soul had just forced its way through poison. The silver fever wolf spoke with a voice that shook every chain in the hall. "She hears me." Lady Sorrel went white. Malric's fever stopped burning. Then the Alpha King roared. Not in pain, in recognition. He ripped one fever chain halfway from the obsidian dais before the silver burned through his wrist. His gold eyes locked on Maren as if she were the only thing keeping his beast from vanishing again. "Her name," he snarled at the court. "Say her name." No one answered. Maren Grayle collapsed with the king's sealed wolf still howling through her blood. Malric broke the second chain before the court remembered how to scream. Silver fever links tore halfway from the obsidian dais, shrieking against the stone as the Alpha King dragged one arm free. The metal burned deep around his wrist, but he did not seem to feel it. His gold eyes were fixed on the wolfless healer lying at the foot of the dais, her palms still marked by his fever, her wrists glowing beneath the skin as if moonlight had been stitched into her veins. No one went to her. Not the high healers, not the moon priests, not the nobles who had just watched her survive what should have killed her. Malric's voice cut through the hall. "I told you to say her name." A lord near the front swallowed. "Maren Grayle." The name passed unwillingly, from mouth to mouth. Maren Grayle. Maren Grayle. Maren Grayle. Each time the court said it, the fever wolf above her wrists sharpened in shape. Its silver spine lengthened. Its massive head lowered toward Malric, and the trapped black wolf shadow behind him strained against the golden seal, pressing it flat to the wall. Lady Sorrel moved first, not toward Maren, toward the fever wolf. She lifted the white wolf pendant at her throat and let its pale glow spread across her fingers. "Majesty, the girl has become a fever carrier. If she is not contained, your sickness may enter the hall." High Fever Master Odrin seized the warning like a weapon. "Bind her wrists." Malric turned his head. The room went cold despite the golden heat. Odrin bowed quickly, but his eyes remained on Maren with the hunger of a man seeing a rare specimen where a dying girl had been. "Not as punishment, Majesty. As record. If the royal fever chose her pulse, then we must preserve the evidence before it burns through her. A carrier who survives first contact may still rupture on the second." Maren heard him from somewhere far away. Rupture. Evidence. Carrier. The words drifted above her like hands searching for where to cut. She tried to move her fingers. Pain flashed up both arms. The fever inside her did not spread like sickness now. It beat in time with her heart, a second rhythm under the first. Golden heat pressed through her palms, where she had touched Malric. Silver marks branched from her wrists, thin as roots beneath the skin. And inside those roots, something howled. Not at her. Through her. Maren opened her eyes. The fever wolf hovered above her arms, its body made from sharp silver strands and royal gold heat. Its mouth did not move yet. The sound of it shook her blood. Not fever. The words struck inside her pulse. Maren gasped. Odrin's healers came forward with narrow silver bands, each engraved with tiny thorns. Sorel watched from beside the dais, face composed again, but her hand had closed tightly over her pendant. Malric pulled against his remaining chains. No one touches her. Odrin did not stop. Majesty, with respect, you are still under fever restraint. Until your wolf stabilizes, the hall must follow healer law. Healer law sent her to die. Healer law may have saved you. The court murmured at that. Malric's jaw tightened. Maren saw the trap even through the pain. If Malric tore himself fully free, they would call the fever violent. If he defended her too strongly, they would say she had bewitched his sickness. If he stayed bound, Odrin and Sorel would take her wrists and turn her into another royal instrument. The first silver band opened above her skin. The fever wolf snarled. Every wolf in the hall flinched. Maren forced one word through her teeth. Wait. No one expected it. The healer holding the band froze. Odrin's eyes narrowed. The carrier is delirious. Maren turned her head toward Malric. He was still bound by one wrist, and both ankles silver biting into his skin, but his gaze was clear, fierce, focused entirely on her. What did you hear? He asked. The question did not sound like doubt. It sounded like he already knew the court had lied to him about what pain meant. Maren swallowed against the heat in her throat. Your wolf said, it is not fever. Sorel's pendant flickered, just once. But Malric saw it. So did Maren. Odrin stepped between them. Death fever often takes the shape of speech. Weak minds translate agony into voices. Maren lifted her shaking wrists. The silver marks beneath her skin brightened. Thin fever strands rose from her veins, not outward to the hall, but toward Malric's chest. Halfway there, they struck something invisible and bent sharply toward Sorel. A hush fell. The fever strands pointed at the white wolf pendant. Sorel smiled softly, though her color had faded. A dying carrier convulses toward whatever light she sees. Maren listened to the howl inside her blood. This time the words came harder, tearing through her pulse. False cure, Maren whispered them. Malric went still. Odrin snapped. Gag her. The order exposed too much. Two healers lunged for Maren. Malric ripped the last wrist chain free with a sound that cracked the dais. He caught the first healer by the collar and threw him aside, then stepped down from the obsidian platform with fever still burning under his skin. The hall recoiled from its own king. He reached Maren before the second band touched her. For a moment, his hand hovered above her wrist. He did not seize her. He waited. Even half-poisoned, half-chained with his wolf sealed behind him and court law pressing against his crown, he waited for permission. Maren gave the smallest nod. Malric took her wrist gently. The fever under her skin surged toward him. The sealed black wolf shadow on the wall slammed one paw against its golden prison. Cracks spread through the light. Sorel's pendant flared white. And from beneath Maren's fingers, a black thread of poison rose out of Malric's veins and wrapped itself around Sorel's chain. Sorel tore the white wolf pendant from her throat. The motion was too quick to look innocent. A gasp rippled through the fever hall as the broken chain lashed across her collarbone and the pendant swung free in her clenched fist. Pale light flickered between her fingers, no longer soft, no longer holy. Under the glow, something black, twisted like a vein beneath glass. Malric saw it. So did Maren. The fever in her wrists struck harder, not spreading through her body but beating in short, violent pulses that matched the trapped wolf shadow slamming against the golden seal on the wall. Sorel lifted her chin. This is royal medicine. Maren pushed herself up on one elbow. Her arms shook beneath her silver fever marks, branching from wrist to palm like living roots. Then why does his sickness reach for it? High Fever Master Odrin moved between Maren and the court before anyone could answer. Because the girl is untrained. A wolfless pulse cannot read royal infection correctly. She mistakes treatment for poison. Malric's hand remained around Maren's wrist, warm and iron-steady, despite the fever burning in him. He did not pull her closer. He did not release her either. "What did my wolf say?" he asked. Odrin's jaw tightened. Majesty Malric's gold eyes cut to him. "Not you." The command fell like a blade. Maren swallowed. The howl inside her blood pressed against her pulse, rough with pain and fury. It did not speak in full courtly phrases. It struck her in fragments, images, instincts, wounds. White chain, sweet rot, false moon. She forced the words out. "It says her cure is a leash." The nobles recoiled from Sorel. Not far. Power had roots in their fear. But enough. Sorel's eyes cooled. A wolfless girl faints wakes with fever marks and suddenly speaks for the king's beast. How convenient. Maren flinched despite herself. The words found old bruises. Wolfless. Convenient. Useful when carrying pain. Dangerous when naming it. Odrin seized the opening. "Majesty, the fever may be using her resentment. Lower healers often mistake bitterness for revelation. Her body is in crisis. If we bind her wrists now, we may still preserve whatever message the sickness imprinted." "Preserve," Malric said. His voice was quiet. Odrin bowed. "For study, for control." No one answered. Maren felt Malric's thumb shift against her wrist, just enough to steady her shaking hand. The touch was not gentle in the way soft men pretended to be gentle. It was restrained power. A king reminding his own anger not to crush what he meant to protect. Sorel stepped toward the dais pendant, still hidden in her fist. "If you let her turn the court against the only treatment that has kept you alive, you will die before moonrise." "Then show the pendant," Malric said. Sorel stopped. The fever wolf above Maren's arms lowered its head. Odrin's smoke-stained fingers twitched toward the silver vials at his collar. Maren saw the motion. So did Malric. "Do not reach for another vial," he said. Odrin froze. For the first time, fear thinned the old healer's face. Sorel smiled then, but it was no longer beautiful. "You think I fear a test? Very well." She opened her hand. The white wolf pendant lay against her palm, glowing softly again. Smooth, pure, noble. The black thread had vanished. Maren's pulse faltered. Had she imagined it? Had the fever lied? A few nobles exhaled in relief. One of Sorel's cousins near the eastern banners murmured moon-blessed silver. "She has carried that pendant since betrothal season." Malric looked at Maren. Not accusing, waiting. That almost hurt more. Maren stared at the pendant until her vision blurred. The fever in her wrists throbbed once then again, driving pain into the bones of her hands. The silver marks under her skin brightened. "No," the howl told her. "Not surface. Blood remembers beneath polish." Maren lifted her marked wrist. Sorel's lips parted. "Do not point that curse at me." "I am not pointing," Maren whispered. "It is listening." The fever light under her skin drew itself into a single sharp line, from wrist to fingertip. She touched the black marble floor. The hall shuddered. Every silver bowl around the dais rang once. Then the old fever stains beneath the marble awakened. Maren saw them all, not with her eyes, with her pulse. Dozens of faint trails hidden under years of washing and moon salt. The path from Malric's dais to Sorel's chamber. The path from Sorel's chamber to Odrin's locked medicine room. The path from the medicine room back to the dais again and again, each trail stained gold at the center and black at the edges. "This has happened before," Maren said. Malric's grip tightened on her wrist. Odrin whispered, "Enough." Maren looked at him. "How many nights did you call the poison fever?" His face hardened. Sorel stepped forward. "Careful, girl." The fever wolf snapped its jaws. The pendant in Sorel's palm cracked. Not fully. Just one hairline fracture down the white wolf's throat. Black liquid seeped from it. The cord erupted. Malric rose to his full height. The remaining ankle chains snapped against the dais as his sealed wolf shadow slammed both paws into the golden prison. Cracks spread behind him, jagged and bright. Sorel closed her fist around the bleeding pendant. "I kept him alive." "No," Maren said, though the effort nearly dropped her. "You kept him trapped." Odrin's voice turned sharp. "Bind the girl now, or the king's beast will break loose, poisoned." 4 royal guards moved. Malric stepped in front of Maren. Even half-bound, fever-torn, and shaking with the force of his own sealed wolf, he became the most dangerous thing in the hall. No one touches her wrists. The golden prison behind him split wider. For one heartbeat, the black wolf shadow's eyes opened. They were not gold. They were silver fixed on Maren. The howl inside her blood became a command. Break the false moon. Maren looked at Sorel's pendant, then at Malric, then at the guards closing in. The fever marks on her wrists burned white-hot, and the sealed wolf spoke through her blood again. If she breaks it, I wake. Sorel closed both hands around the cracked pendant. Black liquid ran between her fingers. The court saw it. The nobles saw it. Even the guards advancing on Maren faltered as the dark poison slid over Sorella's pale knuckles and smoked where it touched her moon-blue sleeve. Still, Sorelle did not drop it. Her face hardened into something colder than fear. You do not understand what you are trying to wake. Maren pushed herself higher from the marble one-marked wrist pressed to the floor. The fever inside her veins throbbed in answer to the broken pendant, each pulse sending silver pain through her hands. The shape of the fever wolf above her arms stretched toward Sorel, not attacking, only straining like a chained beast scenting the key. Malric stood in front of Maren, broad shoulders blocking half the hall. The golden fever beneath his skin had dimmed, but the seal behind him still held his wolf shadow flat against the wall. Cracks ran through the prison of light. Through those cracks, silver eyes watched Maren. High Fever Master Odrin lifted his hand. Contain the witness. Maren heard the word before the rest of the hall understood it. Witness. Not carrier. Not delirious girl. Odran had named her too quickly. Malric turned slowly. What did you call her? Odrin's face closed. A fever witness is an old lower term. Nothing more. Sorel shot him a look sharp enough to cut. Maren felt the truth move beneath that lie. The fever inside her did not burn toward death. It listened. It remembered paths, stains, touch, poison command. It had shown her the trails under the marble because her blood could hear what royal sickness had been forced to hide. I am not carrying it, Maren whispered. The fever marks in her wrists brightened. I am hearing it. The silver fever wolf lowered its head until its muzzle hovered near her hands. The hall filled with a deep vibration, too low to be sound, too strong to be silence. Odrin snapped his fingers. Two healers rushed forward with the thorn-etched bands. Malric moved, but the remaining fever chain around his ankle dragged him half a step back. The silver links burned red against his skin. He did not cry out yet. Maren saw his jaw lock with the effort of staying upright. The first healer seized Maren's arm. The moment his fingers closed over her wrist, the fever mark beneath her skin flashed. He screamed and let go. Not burned, marked. A thin silver line had appeared across his palm, beating with the same rhythm as Maren's pulse. Odrin went still. Maren looked at the healer's hand, then at Odrin. You knew touch would answer. That is enough, Odrin said. This time his calm was gone. Sorel stepped backward toward the dais, still hiding the bleeding pendant. Majesty, listen to me. If your wolf wakes while the poison remains in its blood, it will not recognize court crown or mate. It will tear through the hall and call it freedom. Malric's eyes did not leave the pendant. You have no right to speak of what my wolf will recognize. It recognized pain before it recognized her. The words struck something in him. Maren felt it through the fever pulse, a jagged memory, not hers, not fully his. A black forest under winter rain. Malric kneeling beside a dead white wolf banner. Sorel's hand offering a glowing pendant. Odrin's voice saying the cure would quiet the beast long enough for the crown to survive. Quiet, not heal. Maren's marked fingers curled against the marble. The fever wolf growled through her blood. Sorel saw the decision forming and moved first. She slammed the pendant against Malric's chest. White light burst across the hall. Malric's body arched as the cracked charm tried to bury itself in the fever beneath his skin. The sealed wolf shadow behind him threw its head back, silent and furious, as fresh golden bands began knitting across the cracks. Maren did not think. She lunged. Her hand closed over Sorel's wrist. Silver fever light snapped from Maren's veins into the pendant. Sorel screamed. The black poison inside the white wolf charm writhed like a living root. For one terrible heartbeat, Maren felt it searching for a way into her blood, promising cold silence, obedience. It was not illness. It was command made liquid. Odrin shouted. Cut her loose from it, no one moved. Maren held on. Her palm burned around Sorel's wrist. The silver fever marks under her skin braided tighter, not rising outward but driving inward to the hard beat beneath her bones. The fever wolf spoke inside her pulse. Not break stone, break name. Maren understood. The pendant was not merely a charm, it was called Cure, because the court had agreed to call it Cure. It was called Moon-blessed, because Odrin had recorded it that way. It was called Mercy, because Sorel wore it beautifully. Maren dug her nails into the chain around the pendant and said the word the fever had carried to her. Leash. The white wolf pendant split from throat to tail. Black poison burst across the dais, smoking where it struck the obsidian. The golden bands sealing Malric's wolf shadow shattered outward like glass. The force threw Maren backward. Malric caught her before she struck the floor. His arms closed around her carefully despite the fever still raging beneath his skin. Behind him, the black wolf shadow peeled itself from the wall for the first time, massive and trembling, silver-eyed and half-starved. Every noble fell silent. The wolf looked at Maren, then lowered its head. Not to a queen, not to a mate, to the only witness of its suffering. Odrin's face had gone ashen. Sorel staggered with the broken chain hanging from her hand, black poison staining her fingers. The poison did not drip from her fingers. It climbed back under her rings. Malric looked down at Maren, and his voice was rougher than any command he had given that night. "What are you?" Maren tried to answer. But the fever in her wrists surged again, suddenly colder, deeper, and far older than Malric's sickness. Across the marble floor, every hidden fever stain in the hall lit silver, not just one trail, dozens, hundreds, all leading beneath the royal healing tower to iron-sealed fever vaults, no court record named. Odrin took one step back, not from Maren, from the direction of the healing tower. And from below the palace, something began to howl back. Malric set Maren on her feet before the floor finished shaking. He did it carefully, as if every part of him wanted to lift her away from the fever stains, and every law in the hall warned him that touching her too much would give the court another weapon. His hands left her arms the moment she could stand. The absence of them felt colder than the marble. Beneath her skin, the silver marks in her wrists pulsed toward the royal healing tower. Not toward Malric, not toward Sorel, toward the hidden place, no court record named. The nobles had gone pale. The fever stains under the floor had not faded. They shone in hundreds of thin silver paths, all cutting across the fever hall like veins beneath black glass. Malric looked at Odrin. "What is under my healing tower?" High Fever Master Odrin's mouth tightened. Old quarantine chambers. Maren's wrists burned. The fever wolf beside her gave a low, soundless snarl. Malric's silver-eyed wolf shadow lifted its head behind him, half-free and trembling with hunger for truth. "Try again," Malric said. Odrin's fingers moved toward the silver vials at his collar. Malric stepped forward. The old healer stopped. Lady Sorel laughed softly, though her hand had begun to shake. The poison that had climbed beneath her rings darkened the skin around each jewel, turning her noble fingers into something bruised and cold. "You are letting a lower ward girl drag the court through fever dreams." Maren looked at the black stains under Sorel's rings. "Does it hurt?" Sorel's smile vanished. "Good." Maren had spent years being spoken over while pain moved through other people's bodies. She knew the moment a wound answered before its owner did. "The poison is returning to you," Maren said. Sorel curled her fingers into her palm. "You know nothing about royal cures." "No," Maren said, "but his wolf does." The words shifted the hall. Not because they were loud, because they were true enough to frighten those who depended on lies staying elegant. Odrin lifted his chin. "A fever witness hears residue, not judgment. They are rare, unstable, historically dangerous." Malric turned slowly. "So now she is not delirious." Odrin's eyes flickered. "A mistake." Maren caught it. "So you knew what I was," she said. "No," Odrin answered too quickly. "I suspected what your blood might become under pressure." "Under pressure," Malric repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "You mean under death." The silver fever stains brightened. A new path appeared across the floor, thin at first, then widening into a river of light that ran from Malric's cracked dais toward the far archway leading to the healing tower. No one moved. Then the fever wolf did. It stepped over the marble, not fully solid, its body made from moon-silver pain and the hard glow of Maren's marked blood. Wherever its paws touched the floor, old stains answered. The path under it turned white-hot. Maren felt the pull in her wrists. A command, but not from Odrin's records. Come see. She took one step. Malric moved beside her. Sorel snapped, Majesty. If you leave the fever hall before the wolf is stabilized, the council may declare you unfit under emergency law. Malric did not look back. Let them try while my wolf is standing. His wolf shadow rose higher behind him, not whole, but no longer flat against the wall. The court did not try. They followed. The passage to the royal healing tower had always smelled of herbs, beeswax, and clean linen. Tonight, beneath the fever-light, Maren smelled metal, old smoke, and sealed pain. The silver paths ran ahead of her across the stone, down the tower stairs, past polished treatment rooms, past the public shelves of cures and records, deeper into the bones of the palace. Odrin walked behind them under guard. For once, the high healer looked his age. Sorel walked near him, her poisoned rings hidden inside her sleeves. Maren noticed anyway, so did Malric. At the base of the tower, the air changed. The walls were no longer white stone, but black iron ribbed with silver seams. 7 vault mouths lined the underground chamber, each sealed with fever script and old royal wax. No handles, no public names. Only numbers carved so small they could be missed by anyone not forced to kneel. Maren's wrists flared. The marks under her skin answered all 7 vaults at once. Malric stopped beside her. Can you open them? Odrin said. She must not. Maren looked at him. Because of infection, his silence told her enough. The fever wolf turned to the 3rd vault. There, the silver script began to melt. Not from heat, from recognition. Inside Maren's pulse, the sealed howl struck again. Pieces. The word hurt. She pressed both marked wrists against the iron. The vault did not open like a door. It split along its silver seams, folding inward like a wound forced to show what had healed wrong. The chamber beyond was filled with hanging glass fever vials, hundreds of them. Each one held a thread of light gold, silver, black, or white, suspended in thick, clear fluid. Some pulsed faintly. Some trembled as Maren stepped inside. Some were almost dark. Every vial bore a name. Not Malric's. He entered behind her and went still. Maren read the nearest label. Ressa Thorn, Lower Ward Fever Taker. Another. Joran Vale, Wolfless Pulse Carrier. Another. Tavik Mar, Stable Healer. Servants, healers, failed carriers. Forgotten names the court had erased by calling their deaths necessary. But one row hung apart from the rest. 7 black gold vials sealed with Sorel's white wolf sigil. Malric reached for one. Odrin shouted, "Do not touch that. Too late." The vial cracked in Malric's hand. A violent silver howl burst from the glass and slammed into his chest. His wolf shadow staggered forward, suddenly larger, suddenly furious, as if a missing piece of its rage had returned. Maren gripped the shelf to stay upright. She understood. The death fever had not been growing stronger. It had been missing pieces of itself. Odrin had been cutting the king's wolf apart and storing each howl as evidence, cure, and leash. Sorel stepped backward toward the stair. The poison under her rings flashed black. Maren turned toward the final vial on the separate row. It was not labeled with Malric's name. It was labeled with hers, Maren Grayle reserved. Sorel ran for the stair. She did not scream. She did not plead. She moved with the beautiful discipline of a woman who had practiced panic privately and knew exactly which lie to drop first if the truth ever found her. Malric caught her before the first step. Not by the throat, by the wrist. The poison under her rings flashed black against his fingers, and his half-restored wolf shadow surged behind him with a snarl that shook every hanging vial in the vault. Sorel's face twisted for one raw instant before she smoothed it again. "Let go," she said. "That poison is still in your blood." Malric's grip did not tighten. It did not need to. "Then you should fear touching me more than I fear touching you." Maren stood before the vial, bearing her name, unable to look away. Maren Grayle reserved. The letters were written in Odrin's sharp medical hand, not hurried, not recent. The ink had browned at the edges beneath the glass label. That was what made her skin go cold. This had not been prepared tonight. Not after the court saw the fever answer her. Not after the king's sealed wolf spoke through her blood, long before they dragged her into the fever hall someone had known. Odrin remained at the vault entrance, 2 royal guards holding him by the arms. His face looked hollow in the silver glare of the fever vials, but his eyes had fixed on the reserved vial with something worse than fear: loss. As if Maren had found a tool before he was ready to use it. Malric saw the same thing. How long, Odrin said nothing. The fever wolf beside Maren lowered its muzzle to the vial. Silver strands moved beneath its translucent skin, pulsing with her marked wrists. The glass trembled. How long, Malric repeated. Odrin looked at Maren then. Not at the king. At Maren. You were 13 when the first note entered the lower ward record, he said quietly. A wolfless girl survived marsh fever after drawing it from 6 soldiers in one night. No beast blood, no moon convulsion, no heart failure. Maren remembered that night. The soldiers had been left near the back wall because the war physicians said they were already lost. She had knelt between their cots until dawn, wiping sweat from their faces and taking the heat into her own hands because no one else would touch them. 3 lived, 3 died. She had spent the next day vomiting black water behind the laundry house. No one came. She had thought no one knew. Odrin's voice continued clinical now, because cruelty often hid behind exactness. At 15, you carried red vein fever from an entire nursery wing of servants' children and did not mark. At 17, you drew moon rot from an old battle wolf and walked again before sunset. Each case confirmed the same possibility. Malric's eyes darkened. You kept records on her suffering. I kept records on rare survival. You mean useful survival? Maren said. Odrin did not deny it. Sorel laughed once under Malric's hold. Do not make him the only villain. Every court survives by noticing what can be used. Malric turned her wrist slightly. The black poison under her rings writhed. You noticed too. Her smile thinned. I noticed what your kingdom needed. My kingdom did not need a leash on my wolf. No, Sorel's eyes flashed. Your wolf nearly killed 3 councilmen the night your brother's banner was burned. It split the war table. It hunted grief like an enemy. You think I poisoned a peaceful beast I kept a ruined king from becoming a monster? The vault went still. Maren felt the old wound strike through Malric before his face showed anything. Brother. Burned banner. Grief. A memory of black rain shivered through the fever pulse between them, then vanished. Malric released Sorel's wrist. She stumbled, surprised by the mercy. Then his voice dropped. You do not get to call a cage compassion because you feared what grief might do. The half-restored wolf shadow pressed close behind him, silver eyes fixed on Sorel. It did not attack. That restraint seemed to frighten her more than its rage. Maren reached for the vial with her name. Odrin surged against the guards. Do not open it. Malric looked at him. What is inside? Odrin swallowed. The fever wolf answered through Maren's pulse. Future cut. Maren's fingers stopped just short of the glass. What does that mean? She asked. Odrin closed his eyes. Sorel whispered, It means the vial is not full yet. Maren turned slowly. The poison had climbed to the second knuckle beneath Sorel's rings, blackening the skin like ink spreading under ice. Sorel lifted her chin anyway. It was prepared for the final fever. When Malric's wolf weakened enough, Odrin would take the last royal sickness from him and place it into the only body that could survive the transfer. Maren's throat tightened. Me. Odrin opened his eyes. A fever witness can hold the pattern of a sickness without dying. If refined, that pattern can be used to command the sickness later. Command, Malric said. There was no warmth left in the word. Odrin's voice cracked. To prevent catastrophe. Maren understood before he finished. They had not planned to cure Malric. They had planned to copy his fever into her blood study, the howl, refine the poison, and control whatever remained of the king's wolf through her pulse. The reserved vial was not a grave marker. It was a future chain. Maren's marked wrists burned white. Every vial in the vault began to tremble. The names on the forgotten fever takers glowed one by one, answering her rage with their own. Sorel stepped back. Careful, girl. Break this vault, and every fever stored here wakes. Maren looked at the hundreds of hanging names. Not samples, people, pain cut into glass. Malric moved beside her, close but not touching. Maren. The sound of her name steadied something wild in her blood. She looked at him. His face was still harsh, still fevered, still dangerous. But the command had left his eyes. He was asking, not ordering. "What do you hear?" he said. Maren listened. Not to Sorel, not to Audrin, to the hundreds of thin silver pulses beating behind glass. At first they were separate, broken, weak. Then they gathered under her skin like a buried pack finding one rhythm. The fever wolf lifted its head. Maren whispered, "They do not want to wake." Audrin sagged with relief. Then she heard the second part. "They want to be named." The vault answered. Every vial cracked at once. Maren slammed both marked wrists against the nearest shelf. The hanging glass did not burst outward. It split in thin silver lines, each fracture glowing around the name it carried. Hundreds of fever vials trembled in their iron cradles, not spilling sickness, not flooding the vault with death, but ringing with a sound too delicate for panic and too sharp for silence. Names. Every cracked vial whispered its own name. Ressa Thorn, Joran Vale, Tavik Mar. Others followed one after another, until the iron-sealed fever vault filled with the murmur of people the palace had reduced to samples. Lower ward healers, stable hands, fever takers, war servants, wolfless carriers, those whose pain had been stored because noble medicine had found their suffering useful. Maren staggered beneath the weight of them. Malric caught her by the elbow, then released the moment she steadied. His restraint was becoming a language she understood. He would stop her from falling, but he would not make her small by holding her longer than she chose. "What is happening?" he asked. Audrin answered before Maren could. "Contamination." The fear in his voice was real now. Maren looked at the vials. The cracked glass shone, but the fever inside remained suspended, waiting around each name like a candle around a wick. "No," she said. "Recognition." Audrin's face twisted. "You do not know enough to name what you see. I know enough to hear who they were." The silver marks beneath Maren's wrists brightened. The fever wolf at her side stepped deeper into the vault. Its paws made no sound, but each place it touched woke another row of names. Malric's wolf shadow moved behind it, larger now, still half-starved, still silver-eyed, watching every vial as if part of its own pain had been shelved in pieces. Sorel stood near the stair, one hand hidden in her sleeve, the poison under her rings crawling toward her knuckles. "Let her continue," she said suddenly. Audrin turned on her. "Are you mad?" Sorel's smile was thin. "If the vault wakes, the court will see what a fever witness truly does. Then they will beg us to contain her." Maren felt the trap. Not through logic, through pulse. The fever under her skin tightened when Sorel spoke, warning her of a blade wrapped in silk. Malric stepped between Sorel and Maren. "You have mistaken exposure for control all night. And you have mistaken pity for judgment," Sorel said. "She is standing among enough sickness to kill half your kingdom. One mistake, and your mercy becomes a massacre." Maren flinched. There it was. The burden placed on every healer who had ever been used by power. If she obeyed, she was useful. If she resisted, she was dangerous. Her fingers curled. The vials rang harder. Audrin whispered, "Stop her pulse." Malric heard him. So did Maren. Audrin had not meant to speak aloud. The old healer's eyes flicked toward a black iron lever set into the wall behind the shelves. It was almost hidden beneath medical script and old wax seals. Not a door, not a lock, a fever dam. Maren understood what it did before he reached for it. If pulled, the vault would silence every stored fever at once. Not cure them, mute them. Malric moved first, but Sorel lifted her poisoned hand, and the black under her rings flashed. Pain struck the king like a hook. His wolf shadow jerked backward, snarling as if the poison still knew how to pull him from the inside. Audrin lunged for the fever dam. Maren touched the nearest cracked vial. The name on it burned white. "Ressa Thorn," she said. The vault answered. A small silver shape rose inside the vial, not a body, not a ghost, but a memory of fever held too long. It turned toward Audrin. The old healer stopped. The memory spoke in a woman's weak, furious voice. "He cut the fever from me after I begged him to leave enough to remember my own hands." Audrin backed away. Maren touched another. "Joran Vale." A second voice rose. "He said wolfless blood did not need consent." Another. "Tavik Mar." He wrote stable rot instead of royal trial. The vault filled with testimony. Not wild, not chaotic, precise. Every name carried a wound, and every wound pointed toward the records that had erased it. Malric's face darkened until he looked less like a king and more like a storm about to choose a mountain. Odrin raised both hands. I served the crown. No, Malric said. You served a method. Sorel's voice sliced through the testimonies. Then hear the method's finest work. She reached into her sleeve and drew out a black gold fever vial no one had seen her take. Its label was covered by her thumb, but Malric reacted before the name showed. His body went still. Maren felt his pulse through the fever marks in her own wrists. Grief, old buried, violent. Sorel turned the vial so the silver label faced the vault. Rovan Stormholt, first royal source. Malric stopped breathing for one harsh second. My brother, he said. The half-restored wolf shadow behind him lowered its head with a sound that shook dust from the iron seams. Sorel's eyes glittered. Your brother's last fever did not die with him. Odrin preserved it, refined it, mixed it into the cure that kept your wolf quiet when grief made you unfit to rule. Maren stared at the vial. The fever inside was not golden. It was black at the center, silver at the edges, and beating like a heart that had been forced to keep accusing. Malric reached for it. Sorel lifted the vial higher. Take one more step and I break it. Odrin whispered, horrified Sorel no. She smiled. Now you fear waste. The poison under her rings climbed fully over her fingers, binding itself to the vial like living ink. Maren's fever wolf snarled. Inside her wrists, every named fever gathered into one hard pulse. The vial containing Rovan Stormholt's stolen death began to glow. And from within the glass, Malric's brother whispered, he did not burn my banner. She did. Malric's hand closed around empty air. Sorel had pulled the black gold vial just beyond his reach, and for the first time that night, the Alpha King looked less like a ruler restraining rage and more like a man standing at the edge of an old grave that had begun speaking. His name. Maren felt the change before she saw it. The fever marks under her wrists struck hard against her pulse. Once, twice, warning. Malric's half-restored wolf shadow grew behind him, fur bristling like black storm clouds, silver eyes fixed on the vial that held his brother's stolen death. Sorel lifted it higher. Careful, she said. A royal source does not forgive rough hands. Malric's voice dropped until it barely sounded human. Give him to me. Your brother is dead. Then stop using him. The words cracked something through the vault. Every hanging vial rang once. Maren steadied herself against the shelf. The fever wolf beside her pressed its shoulder to her marked wrists, not solid enough to hold her up, but close enough for its pain to become direction. Ask the fever what it served. The command moved through her blood in the sealed wolf's rhythm. Maren looked at the label on Rovan's vial. Rovan Stormholt, first royal source. Source of what she asked. Odrin's head snapped toward her. Do not question royal fever without preparation. Maren ignored him. Rovan Stormholt. Source of what? The black center of the vial pulsed. Sorel's fingers tightened until the poison beneath her rings threaded over the glass. For one heartbeat, Maren thought she would crush it, but Sorel hesitated, because the vial was not only evidence, it was leverage. The fever inside the glass stirred. A man's voice emerged thin from long storage, but unmistakably royal. Obedience. Malric went utterly still. Odrin closed his eyes. The vault seemed to lean toward the word. Maren's stomach turned cold. Not cure. No, Rovan whispered. Not cure. Sorel's face hardened. A dead man's fever remembers pain, not politics. The vial answered before Maren could. I remember the banner room. Malric's wolf shadow snarled so violently that iron seams groaned above them. Sorel stepped back, but her voice remained smooth. Your brother was delirious when he died. He blamed everyone. He even blamed you, Majesty, before the end. Malric flinched. Not much. Enough. Maren saw how deeply the lie had been placed. Not as an accusation spoken once, but as a hook left under the skin for years. Malric had carried grief, shaped by Sorel's hand, and every time his wolf raged, the court had called that rage proof of weakness. Rovan's vial burned brighter. Not him, the voice inside said. Never him. The black poison around Sorel's rings crawled over her knuckles. Odrin's voice shook. Lady Vask, lower the vial. Sorel laughed softly. Now you remember caution, Maren turned on Odrin. You preserved this. I preserved evidence, no, Malric said. His gaze stayed on Sorel. You preserved a weapon. The old healer's mouth trembled, then firmed. Rovin's death fever was unlike any royal sickness recorded. It carried grief, rage, command response. If left unmanaged, it would have ignited the Stormholt wolf line. Your wolf was already unstable after his death. Because she made it so, Maren said. The fever in her wrists answered with a sharp silver pulse. The vials around them lit in sequence, each one flashing toward Sorel, then Odrin, then the black gold vial. A pattern. Not random storage, a chain of refinement. Rovin's fever had been taken first, then diluted through forgotten carriers, then mixed with white pendant poison, then fed back to Malric as a cure until his wolf became too weak to break the seal. Sorel saw Maren understand. Her mask finally cracked. You think kings are born safe, she hissed. Stormholt wolves do not mourn, they devour. Rovin would have challenged every border lord if he lived. Malric would have burned the council after him. My house offered restraint when your bloodline offered only teeth. Malric took one step. The floor beneath his boot split. Maren's pulse screamed. Not because of Sorel, because Malric's wolf was listening too well. The silver-eyed shadow behind him swelled, drawing the stored royal fever toward itself. The black gold vial shook in Sorel's hand. If it broke now, not as testimony, but as impact, Rovin's preserved death would strike Malric's half-restored wolf like oil on flame. Sorel knew it. Her smile returned, desperate and bright. Yes, come closer. Maren moved before Malric could. She pressed her marked wrist against his forearm. The contact burned both of them. Malric's eyes cut to hers. For a moment there was no court, no vault, no dead brother between them. Only fever restraint and the fragile choice not to let pain choose the next act. Do not let her aim your grief, Maren said. His jaw worked. The wolf shadow behind him trembled, fighting itself. Sorel's hand tightened around the vial. Touching but too late, she drove her poisoned thumb into the glass seal. The vial cracked. Rovin's fever surged toward Malric in a black-silver arc. Maren thrust both wrists into its path. The impact struck her pulse like a hammer. Her knees buckled, but she did not fall. The fever wolf wrapped around her in a crescent of silver pain, and Rovan's stored death stopped against her marked veins trapped between witness and king. Malric roared her name, not command, terror. Maren could not answer. The old royal fever was inside the marks, now not entering her heart, not consuming her, but screaming through every line of witness blood she possessed. Images tore across the vault wall. Rovan alive, wounded, but standing. Sorel younger, holding the white wolf pendant before it was polished clean. A war banner burning with pale blue flame. Odrin kneeling beside Rovan with an empty vial, and Sorel whispering over the dying prince, "Your brother will be easier to rule when he believes his grief killed you." The vision shattered. Malric's wolf shadow lunged. Maren turned blood-wrist light flaring between them. Malric, no. His wolf stopped inches from her. Every vial in the vault went silent. Sorel stared, truly afraid now, because the king's wolf had obeyed Maren while carrying his brother's rage. Then the iron floor beneath the final vault number split open, revealing a lower fever chamber pulsing red below. Odrin began to shake. Maren looked down. At the center of the hidden chamber lay a crown-shaped basin filled with black gold sickness, and inside it, 7 severed wolf-howls circled Malric's name. Malric jumped into the lower chamber before anyone could stop him. The drop should have broken a lesser man. He landed hard on one knee beside the crown-shaped basin, black stone cracking under his weight, fever gold flashing beneath his skin as the hidden chamber answered his blood. Above him, Maren gripped the split iron floor with both marked hands, pain tearing up her wrists as every fever line in the vault pulled toward the basin below. Majesty Odrin shouted, "Not warning, fear!" Malric rose slowly. The basin sat at the center of the chamber like a crown turned upside down to collect sickness. Its rim was carved with wolf teeth, each tooth filled with black gold fever thick as old honey. Around the liquid circled 7 rings of severed howl, each one visible only when it struck the fever's surface, silver claw marks, broken sound, pieces of a wolf's rage cut from the beast and kept moving so it could never heal. At the center of it all burned Malric's name, not written. Wounded into the fever, Maren lowered herself to the chamber floor, ignoring Malric's sharp glance upward. The moment her feet touched the lower stone, her wrist marks flared so fiercely she nearly fell. Malric caught her elbow, again only long enough. Then he released her. "You should not be near this," he said. Maren looked at the basin. "Neither should you." His mouth tightened. Behind him, his wolf shadow stood larger than before, but wrong in its shape. Its spine flickered. Its silver eyes burned too bright. The black-silver fever of Rovin's testimony still clung to its fur, and the 7 stolen howls in the basin tugged at it like hooks buried under skin. Sorel appeared at the split edge above one poisoned hand pressed to her chest. "Do you see now? This is what restraint required." Malric did not look up. "You call mutilation restraint. I call it preventing a Stormholt wolf from tearing its own kingdom apart." Odrin climbed down more slowly, guarded and gray-faced. The basin was never meant to be seen by untrained eyes. Maren almost laughed, but the sound died in her throat. "That is why you buried names in it." Odrin flinched. The fever wolf at Maren's side circled the basin. Its silver body trembled with every stored howl, not absorbing them, not waking them, only listening. That was what Maren understood now. Her power was not to carry all sickness. It was to hear what sickness had been forced to become. She stepped closer. The first severed howl struck the surface. A vision burst upward. Malric younger kneeling in the snow with blood on his hands, Rovin's banner burning behind him. A circle of council lords chanting that the king's grief had made his wolf dangerous. Sorel standing beside Odrin pendant, glowing white. Malric's wolf shadow snarling at the sky while Odrin cut a silver thread from its chest and dropped it into the basin. Malric staggered. Maren reached for him, then stopped herself. He did not need her to soften the truth. He needed it whole. The second howl rose. Malric's wolf chained beneath moon salt. The court applauding Sorel's cure. Odrin recording the cut as stabilization. The wolf's eyes open, aware, furious, unable to tell its own king what had been taken. The third, a battlefield night. Malric winning with half a beast, bleeding. Each stolen howl returned a piece of his life that had been edited into obedience. By the 7th, Malric's hands were shaking. His wolf shadow had grown monstrous behind him, no longer silent, no longer flat, but trembling on the edge of violence. The chamber walls groaned under the force of it. Sorel saw her chance. She dropped into the lower chamber and drove her poisoned rings into the basin. Black gold fever leapt up her arm. Her face contorted, but she smiled through it. "Let him have them then." Odrin shouted. "No." The basin erupted. All 7 severed howls shot toward Malric at once. Maren moved. She slammed both wrists against the basin rim. The impact split her fever marks open in white-silver cracks. Pain tore through her arms so sharply that her vision went black at the edges. But the howls stopped mid-air, suspended between basin and king. Malric roared Maren. She heard him. She also heard the 7 pieces of his wolf. Not words, wounds, rage without memory, grief without name, command without trust. Pain sharpened into a weapon because no one had allowed it to remain pain. If she let them hit him all at once, Sorel would be right for one terrible moment. His wolf would wake, starved, poisoned, and mad enough to make the court fear freedom forever. Maren gritted her teeth. "Not all at once," she whispered. The fever wolf pressed its muzzle to her wrist. The marks under her skin changed rhythm. One pulse, one howl, one truth. Maren pulled the first howl through her marked veins, not into her heart, not to keep, only to witness. It burned across her wrist, showed her its memory, and passed into Malric's wolf shadow as clean silver fire. The beast shuddered. Its back straightened. The second howl followed. Then the third. Each one cut Maren in a place no blade could reach, but each left her. She refused to become another vault. She would not hold what belonged to him. She would only name it on the way home. Odrin sank to his knees. Sorel tried to pull more poison from the basin, but the black under her rings had turned against her fully now. It climbed beneath her skin in branching lines, binding her hand to the rim. "No," she hissed. Maren looked at her through the pain. "It remembers who fed it." The 6th howl entered Malric's wolf shadow. The chamber shook. His beast was nearly whole. The seventh remained above the basin, darker than the others, wrapped around a shard of Rovin's death fever. Malric's face changed when he saw it. Sorel smiled weakly. That one will break him. Maren knew she might be right. The final howl did not carry only Malric's stolen rage. It carried the lie that his grief had killed his brother. Maren reached for it. Malric caught her wrist before she touched the flame. His hand burned against her fever marks, but he did not let go. "No," he said, voice raw. "Not alone." The seventh howl struck both of them. The chamber vanished. Maren saw Rovin die, saw Sorel light the white flame, saw Odrin take the first vial, saw Malric arrive too late and believe the ruin was born from his own wolf. Then the memory turned. It showed one thing no vial had yet revealed. Rovan had not died cursing Malric. He had died hiding a final command inside his fever. "Tell my brother to wake." The seventh howl burst into Malric's wolf. The beast threw back its head. This time the howl was whole. The crown-shaped basin cracked from rim to base. Sorel screamed as the poison under her rings dragged her hand into the breaking stone, and Odrin, still kneeling, whispered the truth too late. "There is one more seal." Malric turned on Odrin before the broken basin finished cracking. The lower fever chamber shook around them. Black gold sickness leaked through the split stone and crawled back into the carvings it had once been forced to obey. Sorel was on her knees at the rim, one hand trapped by the poison climbing beneath her, rings her face white with pain and fury. Above them, the fever vaults rang with every restored name. Malric's wolf stood behind him at last, whole, massive, black as storm fur, silver-eyed, and no longer flattened against walls or cut into pieces. Yet the beast did not lunge. It watched Odrin with a stillness that felt more dangerous than rage. "What seal?" Malric asked. Odrin's eyes flicked to Maren. That was enough. Malric stepped between them at once. The old healer gave a bitter, broken laugh. Still too late to understand. A fever witness does not only hear sickness, she binds the truth of it when she names it. That is why we were careful. That is why she was reserved. Maren's marked wrists throbbed. The vial with her name still hanging in the vault above began to glow through the split floor. Maren Grayle reserved. Sorel lifted her head, smiling through the poison. The last seal was never on him. Maren went cold. Malric's wolf shadow snarled. Odrin whispered. It was written for whoever freed the king's wolf. The fever in Maren's wrists clenched like iron. Lines of silver pain shot from her palms up both arms. Not random. Script. The marks rearranged beneath her skin, forming an old medical command she could feel before she could read. Witness absorbs final corruption. Witness preserves crown stability. Witness expires after naming. Malric's face changed. No, the word was not a command this time. It was refusal so absolute the chamber seemed to flinch from it. Odrin's mouth trembled. It was necessary. If the king's wolf was ever restored, the remaining poison needed somewhere to go. The crown could not risk relapse. "So you wrote her death into the cure," Malric said. "I wrote survival into the kingdom." Maren swayed. Malric reached for her, then stopped with his hand open between them. She understood why. If the seal had turned her blood into its final vessel, touch might pull the poison faster. That restraint hurt more than fear. Sorel forced herself upright, her trapped hand still fused to the basin rim. "Do not look so betrayed, Maren. You were never meant to matter long enough to be betrayed." The chamber went silent. For 9 years, Maren had swallowed fever from bodies no one wanted to touch. She had held hands through delirium-cooled brows, carried pain until her knees shook, and accepted that the court would never call it sacred because no wolf lived under her ribs. Now they had named her purpose clearly. Not healer, not witness, endpoint, a place to send what power no longer wanted in itself. The fever wolf beside her pressed its silver muzzle against her wrist. Inside her pulse, hundreds of named fevers gathered. Ressa Thorn, Joran Vale, Tavik Mar, Rovin Stormholt. All the stored suffering in the vault did not rise to consume her. It waited. Maren looked at Odrin. "You still think naming is the same as owning?" The old healer stared at her. She raised both wrists. The final seal tightened brutally. Silver script burned under her skin, trying to drag the remaining black gold poison from Malric's wolf into her veins. Malric's beast shook with the force of resisting it. Sorel's rings flashed, feeding the command from the broken basin. Maren did not fight the pull. She listened to it. Every curse had a rhythm. Every sickness had a path. Every false cure had to be called something before power would obey it. Odrin had called the pendant cure. Sorel had called the leash mercy. The court had called Maren expendable. Names were not truth. They were instructions. Maren stepped toward the basin. Malric moved with her. Tell me what to do. The court above would have gasped if they had been close enough to hear. The Alpha King of Stormholt asking a wolfless healer for command. Maren looked at his whole wolf, then at the poison dragging at Sorel's rings, then at Odrin's silver vial collar. Do not take the poison from me, she said. Take back the name they gave it. Malric understood. His gold eyes lifted to the upper vault, where the reserved vial glowed like an accusation. I revoke the royal record, he said, voice, carrying through stone and iron. Maren Grayle is not a reserved vessel. The vial cracked. Odrin lurched forward. You cannot erase medical law with anger. Malric's wolf stepped beside him, silver eyes blazing. Then I erase it with crown law. He tore the silver vial collar from Odrin's neck and threw it at the basin. The glass burst. Inside the broken vials were not medicines, but tiny black commands, each one written in fever script, each one tied to a body Odrin had once recorded as useful. They hit the basin and flared. Maren felt the final seal stagger. Not break, stagger. Sorel screamed. You still need a place for the poison, Maren turned to her. No, she said. It already has one. The poison under Sorel's rings writhed. For the first time, Sorel looked down at her own hand, as if it belonged to a stranger. Maren placed both marked wrists over the cracked basin, close enough for the fever script to bite, not close enough to surrender. False cure, she said. The poison recoiled. Leash. Sorel shook her head. Stop, brother blood. Malric's wolf growled low. Stolen howls. The chamber trembled. Reserved death. Odrin fell to his knees. Maren's wrists blazed. And last seal. The final command beneath her skin surfaced fully silver and black, visible to everyone in the chamber. Maren looked at it and spoke the true name. Confession. The basin exploded upward in white fever fire. Not heat. Judgment. The poison ripped away from Malric's wolf, away from Maren's wrists, away from every named fever in the vault. It turned on the hands that had shaped it. Sorel's rings shattered one by one, and the blackness beneath them dragged her arm from the basin, binding her in chains of her own false cure. Odrin's vial collar fragments rose around his throat, not choking him, only marking him with every name he had tried to reduce to record. Above them, the hanging vials burst open. No sickness escaped, only names. They filled the tower like silver sparks, each one rising through stone toward the fever hall, toward the court, toward every noble who had approved quiet deaths because quiet deaths were easy to spend. Malric caught Maren when her knees gave. This time she let him. His arms closed around her carefully, but the fear in him was no longer restrained enough to hide. Maren. She heard her name in his voice and knew it had changed again. Not tool, not witness, not miracle. Maren. Her fever marks dimmed to thin silver lines beneath her wrists. The pain did not vanish, but it became hers. Malric's wolf lowered its head until its muzzle touched the floor before her. Then every fever name in the vault rang once and went still. When they returned to the fever hall, the court was waiting in terror. They had heard the names. All of them. Ressa Thorn, Joran Vale, Tavik Mar, Rovan, Stormholt. Hundreds more. The polished nobles stood beneath wolf banners while the truth moved among them like winter through silk. Malric walked with Maren beside him, not behind him. Sorel was brought in bound by black silver chains of her own poison, her rings broken, her white wolf pendant split and dark. Odrin followed under guard, each fragment of his vial collar marked with a name. No one laughed when they saw Maren. No one called her wolfless. Malric stopped before the obsidian dais, where the court had meant to watch her die. My wolf was not saved by the court, he said. It was cut apart by it. Silence answered. He looked at Maren, not claiming her, asking with his eyes whether she would stand in that silence or let him carry it. Maren stepped forward. My name is Maren Grayle, she said. The fever hall answered. Not with applause. with the glow of every fever stain under the marble lighting once then fading clean. "I am not your carrier," she said. "I am not your reserved death. I am fever witness, and I name what sickness was forced to hide." Malric's wolf stood behind her whole and silent. The court lowered its eyes, not because Malric commanded it, because the hall itself had heard enough. Later, when the fever chains had been melted and the false cure burned under open moonlight, Malric found Maren at the edge of the healing tower. Dawn touched the black stone in pale gold. Her wrists still bore silver marks, but they no longer looked like wounds. They looked like writing no one else had the right to edit. "I cannot undo what they made you carry," Malric said. "No. I cannot make the court worthy of what you survived. No." His mouth tightened, accepting the truth instead of decorating it. "Then I will begin smaller. No healer enters a rite without consent. No fever record hides a name. No cure is called mercy until the one who bears its cost names it so." Maren looked at him. The feared Alpha King stood before her without a throne, without chains, without pretending gentleness could replace justice. "And Sorel?" she asked. "She will live long enough to hear every name she tried to bury." Maren nodded once. His wolf appeared behind him, whole under the morning light. It looked at her with silver eyes, then bowed its great head. Malric did not reach for her. He offered his hand. Open. Waiting. Maren looked at it for a long moment. She had carried fever because others forced her to. She had named poison because truth demanded it. This choice belonged only to her. She placed her marked hand in his, not as a cure, not as a vessel. As the woman who had heard the king's sealed wolf and made the whole court listen,